From the racing capital of the world, Indianapolis, Indiana, welcome to the latest episode in the greatest spectacle in podcasting, the Seventh Gear Over Show, presented to you by our great friends and partners over at KrausMeats.com, as well as our good friends and partners over at Respect Your Package and Dick Carriers, makers of high-end premium men's underwear. And holy smokes, Seventh Gear Over fans, I cannot tell you how excited I am about today's guest for this show. I know we've had kind of a few shows relative to motorsports marketing, but this guy is somebody I've had the great privilege to get to meet and to know a little bit here. We're going to all get to know him a little bit better on this week's show. But the first thing I thought of with this guy when I was introduced to him is that he strikes me as, and I lovingly say this, and I hope he's okay with this, but I kind of refer to him as the godfather of modern motorsports sponsorships. As you can see on the graphics here, he really made his name bringing some of the greatest sponsorships to Newman Haas Racing. He's got a close relationship with Mario and had with Paul Newman before his passing, as well as Carl Haas. And he has worked, the people that he's worked with and or is working with is a litany of who's who in high-end, especially open-wheel motorsports. Like I mentioned, Mario Andretti, Paul Newman, Carl Haas. He's also worked with Arie Luyendyk. He's currently working with the likes of two-time Indy 500 winner Al Unser Jr., the voice of the 500, Paul Page, as well as my good friend Mike Lashman over the Vintage Indy Series. And without further ado, our new friend of the show, the man, the one and only Ralph Howard Hansen. Ralph, welcome to Seventh Gear Over, my friend. How are you today?
Well, I'm a little embarrassed by that glowing introduction, but most of all of what you said was true. So I'm glad to be here today.
I can't tell you how excited I am to have you, because you've like I mentioned in pre-show, you've probably forgotten more about motorsports than I'll ever know, and I feel like I know a fair amount. But holy smokes, Ralph, you've got quite a history in motorsports, and I hope you don't mind me calling you the godfather of modern motorsports
No,
sponsorships, because you
I
really
don't
sort of
mind that at
changed the
all.
game.
I think it's probably true. I think at this stage, I'm probably the person that's been doing this for the longest amount of time continuously. And my very first job when I graduated from college and from Indiana State University in 1970 was Tony Hallman's assistant. And that's a pretty good way to start working in that position. And I've been in the business a long time, and I'm really proud of the accomplishments and the different things that we've done and developed, ideas that we created. And but I'm still going strong and intend to keep going strong. So, but the grandfather or godfather, either term probably does apply.
Fair enough. And I'm so enamored with the idea, and you told me the story, a while back about how kind of your first job out of college was working for Tony Hallman. So that's one hell of a way to make your foray into motorsports. And I know you said it was, upon, your graduation from Indiana State University, but there's a really cool story behind that. So to start off with, what year that was, and then how that whole relationship blossomed with Tony Hallman.
It is a nice story. It was I lived in a Theta Chi fraternity house in Terre Haute, which happened to be two doors down from the Hallman residence. And at the end of my freshman year, 1967, I got elected president of the fraternity, and Tony Hallman had just made a donation of about, I think it was $18 million to Indiana State University to build the Hallman Student Union building. And I decided, well, it would be pretty nice to have a sit-down dinner and invite Mr. and Mrs. Hallman and the president of the university and his wife. And we had an alumni who happened to be Tony Hallman's lawyer, Howard Batman. Interesting man. He was the guy that actually drafted the contract when Tony bought the Speedway from Eddie Rickenbacker. And so I invited him, and we had a dinner at the fraternity house, and it went over lovely. I had these silver trays made up, and I had them engraved, with the fraternity crest and, to the Hallman family and appreciation of your generosity to the Indiana State University. And I had one for each of them. And they were thrilled with it. And, the next morning it was on the front page of the newspaper and everything. And I get a phone call at the fraternity house around lunchtime. One of my fraternity brothers answered. And this is back in the days with the old wall phone. And he goes, "Hey, Ralph, there's somebody on the phone for you." And so I go to the phone, I pick it up, and I go, "Hello?" Uh, he says, "Is this Ralph?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "This is Tony." And I said, "Tony who?" And he goes, "Tony Hallman." I go, "Oh my God, Mr. Hallman." I said, I couldn't imagine you calling me. And he said, "Well, listen," he said, "last night, your organization was the first student group that ever took the time to say thanks." He said, "The university has thanked us, but no student organization has ever reached out before." And he said, "Mary and I had the most wonderful time, and it was so nice that Howard Batman was there and Dr. Rankin." And he goes, "It's a beautiful day today." And he said, "I'm going to fly over on my plane to a building that I have in Dayton, Ohio. And if you don't have any classes," he said, "I'd like for you to go with me." Well, immediately, of course, if I had
Wow.
classes, they would have been canceled. But
No
I
kidding.
said, I said, "What an honor." And he said, "Well, meet me at Holman Field at 2:00. So I went out there. I was a nervous wreck about it, actually, and get on the plane. And he had an immaculately beautiful Beech D-18 twin engine plane. It was a stainless steel plane, but it was so polished that it looked like it was sterling silver. And so we flew over to Dayton, Ohio, and we just started talking about our interests and what I'd like to do and what he liked to do. And we found out that we both like to go fishing. And he goes, "I've got this lodge," he said, "here in Terre Haute out by Rose University." He said, "And there's a beautiful pond on it and a building, a lodge called Lingen Lodge." And he goes, "There's so many fish in that lake, they'll practically jump out of the water." He said, "You want to go out there and go fishing?" And I said, "I'd love it." He said, "Well, how about in a couple days?" So a couple days later, I'm out there, and it's he and I, and we're fishing like right at the edge of the lake. And I said to him, I said, "Mr. Holman, there's a dam over there." And I said, "If we had a little rowboat or something, uh, I bet we could catch a lot of fish in that area." And he goes, "Well, there'll be one here tomorrow." And that was just, and there was, Holman and Company was like, besides Clabber Girl baking powder, Holman and Company was like Sears Roebuck. They sold everything. And they sold aluminum rowboats, and things like that. So we hit it off and became friends. And one year it was spring break, and I had made plans with some of my fraternity brothers to go to Florida. And I was telling Mr. Holman about it. He goes, "Well, why don't you all come down to the Ocean Reef Club and where I have my yacht?" And he says, "And stay down there." So I, I said, "Well, there's 5 of us." He goes, "That's no problem." So we actually went down. A magnificent yacht that he had was originally built for the DuPont family. It was about 150 foot long.
Wow.
When we got to Ocean Reef, um, they had all the yachts docked on these T decks, and at the end of the deck there was this thing that looked like a ship. Uh, and I said, "Oh my God, that's his boat! Look at the smokestack!" And it had the wing and wheel logo on it. So we just had the best time, and he and I went out fishing for grouper in a little tender that he had. There were 2 small boats on the yacht, and we actually caught some grouper. And he said, "We're going to have this for dinner tonight. I'm going to have the chef make grouper chowder." And I'm thinking, fish soup. Never had that before, but I'll tell you, it was delicious. So uh, all the wonderful experiences that I had at the Speedway and the things that he had me do and places that he would take me and the way that he treated me, unforgettable experiences. One year, on the night before the 500, it was his normal procedure to go to a number of parties around Indianapolis, and one of them was at the governor's mansion. And when it was used to be on Meridian Avenue, and so I drove him there in his pace car, and he went up to the door and rang the bell, and I can't remember who it was that came to the door, and oh, Mr. Hallman, come in, you're our guest of honor. And then the guy said to me, he said, your driver can wait in the car. And Tony says, that's not my driver. He said, that's my assistant, and if he doesn't come in, either do I. So it was, that was pretty cool. And so, uh, but he did so many wonderful things. Our fraternity house burned down in 1970. It was a total loss, and there were 35 guys living in the fraternity house. He gave us an entire floor of the Terre Haute house to live in, and provided 2 meals a day. And while we were figuring out what to do, and across the street from our house was this mansion that was owned by Chapman Root, who invented the Coca-Cola bottle. And
Ah.
there was a professor that worked at Rose that lived in the house. And one day I went over there and knocked on the door, and he goes, I already know why you're here. You want to buy the house. And I said, well, not personally, but I said, our alumni board would like to buy the house. And he goes, well, I had figured you'd be calling. And he said, it's time, we're ready to sell. His name was Dr. Theodore Palmer. So Tony helped our alumni association get a mortgage at his bank, and we moved into the Chapman Root house, and we made him an honorary member of our fraternity, and it was a big elaborate deal. And he noticed that we didn't have much stuff because everything we had was pretty much burned up in the fire. And a couple days later, I was with him at Hallman and Company picking out furniture and dishes and things, and he was just unbelievable, just unbelievable.
He sounds like an incredibly generous man. So when
Yeah.
was it that you were brought on with him at the Speedway, and how long was your tenure there before you moved on?
I was brought on in 1970, and he passed away in 1977, uh, which was the year that AJ won his last race, which was there's quite a story in that. Uh, Mr. Hallman had an area at the Speedway called the Hedgerow, right along Georgetown Road, and a lot of the kind of heavy hitters from Terre Haute would have their parties over there. And so I drove him over on the golf cart, and the race is going on, and he's socializing with the friends, and I'm kind of keeping track of what's going on with the race. And I don't know, it was about lap maybe 175 or something like that. And I said, Mr. Hallman, are you aware that AJ's leading the race? And he goes, oh my God. He goes, get me back over there as fast as you can. So we went over, and that was a great day for him. But one story that I really love to tell it, in the 7 years I went back and worked there in 78, but without him being there, it wasn't the same. So that was my last year. So I worked it for 70 to 78, but I was in the Air Force Reserves, and um, and actually, Mr. Hallman helped me get in the Air Force Reserves, but that's another story. But uh, the general who was in charge of our base wanted to do a video about what air reservists do when they're not on active duty. And he goes, you've got an exciting job working at the Speedway, and we'd like to come and film you and redo a recruiting video. And he said, would that be okay? And I said, well, I'm certain it is. I'll check on with Mr. Hallman and make sure it's all right with him. And so we set it up. The general comes with a couple other officers, and he's got on, his stars and everything. And they're taking filming and talking. And one of the jobs that I would have for Mr. Hallman was when a celebrity was at the Speedway, if he couldn't be with them the entire time, I was their escort. And purely by coincidence, on that day that they were making the video, believe it or not, the guest of that for that day was Bob Hope. And I was able to introduce Bob Hope to General Novaresi, and they hit it off like you can't believe. The general invited Bob Hope to play in the Desert Classic, and the next year I arranged through the 500 Festival to have the general as the parade, the grand marshal of the parade. But um, so many wonderful stories, and meeting people, and that I, you know, never dreamed I would meet. The first race that I attended was in 1969, and I went with Tony as his guest, and he took me into the winner's circle. And obviously, as everybody knows, that was the year Mario won the race. And I was there. I saw the Andy Granatelli kiss and everything. And never in a million years could I imagine that I was going to end up working with Mario for so many years. But it wasn't until recently that when I was talking to Mario, that I told him, I said, I was in winner's circle when you won the race. He goes, oh, that's impossible. How could that have happened? And I said, well, I was there with Tony Hallman, and he walked me in. And so that goes back a ways. But that was a memorable experience, to say the least.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, those are the memories that obviously last a lifetime and that you'll never forget. But, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, because I definitely want to spend a good amount of time talking about your relationship with Mario and Carl and Paul Newman. But when you left the Speedway in '78, and for those of you seventh gear overhead fans that don't know, Ralph owns his own marketing company called Pegasus Marketing Corporation, and that's a lot of what we're talking about here in terms of the talent that he's represented and or is representing. So when did Pegasus come in? Kind of how did that fit into when you left the Speedway in '78 to that sort of, for lack of a better term, gap before you started really working with
Okay.
Mario and Carl and those guys?
Well, I got involved in the real estate development business for a while, because the Speedway really, even those years were, even when I worked there, it was only open about a month a year. And I was still very interested in motorsports and kept coming up with different thoughts and ideas. And uh, a friend of mine called me up, and he goes, you know a little bit about racing. He said, I've got a friend that's in NASCAR, and they're looking for some help. Uh, and they'd like for you to come down and meet with them. Now, I hadn't started the company officially, kind of unofficially I had, and it was Ricky Rudd and the driver, and Bud Moore was the team owner. And so I flew down to Spartanburg, South Carolina, to meet with Bud Moore. And interesting story, when I was making the arrangements to go down there, he said, when you buy your ticket, he says, you be sure to buy it on Piedmont Airlines. And I said, why is
Right, that
that?
was their sponsor.
He said, no, it wasn't his sponsor, but it was a sponsor of one of the other teams. And he goes, in NASCAR, we all support the sponsors. So uh, I got started off in, believe it or not, my first real full-time client was in NASCAR. Um, and then it wasn't much long after that, um, I decided I wanted to get into open wheel racing. And I had an opportunity to get involved with um, Provimi Racing. And Ari Leyendyke was a rookie. And I had put together two or three other smaller deals before that, but I started to go to work with Provimi Racing. And I put together the first cause marketing program that I did was, we created a program called Race for Life with the TV actor David Hasselhoff. And the team went from be calling Privimi Racing to Hasselhoff Grunewald Race for Life Racing. And we worked with Make-A-Wish Foundation, and we were bringing kids to races, and we would do a big weekend at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We did this for 14 years. It gravitated over to Newman Haas after Provimi got out of racing, but working with Ari was a wonderful experience. But it really kind of got me started on the cause marketing thing, and it was one of the things that I was most proud of. And I think I've done at least a dozen of them. And I've got several currently that I'm working on already right now.
It never ends for you, does it, Ralph? It never ends. But and I think you and I may have touched on this, offline before today's show. But with that involvement that you had with Ari and Hasselhoff, and a good friend of the show here will know exactly that reference. But you remember then, and you and I may have unknowingly met, just like Mario didn't know that you were there at the Winter Circle in '69. But you remember when in the early days of Pravimi that their shop was just in Metro Milwaukee in this old
Oh,
Skipper
sure, yeah.
Bud's boat
Like
warehouse,
it was a
and they would do
place that sold
pre
boats.
500 parties there.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, I
I was
remember it
at one of
well.
those pre 500 parties.
Yeah. Well, so I decided that cause marketing was a pretty smart thing, and it worked pretty well. And I got a phone call one day from Ott. He said, "I want to meet with you." And I thought, "Oh, this doesn't sound good." So I drove up to Waukesha and met with him. And he said, "I've owned this team and I spent a lot of money on it." He said, "You've been great. You got us MCI and you got us Rain-X and a bunch of other sponsors, and you brought us David." But he said, "I don't want to be a team owner anymore. I want to be a sponsor." And he goes, "I'm going to sponsor Dick Simon." And he said, "I want you to come and be our sponsor guy." And prior to that happening, I had come up with an idea. I had an idea given to me by a client, actually Amoco Oil Company, who was sponsoring Alan Kulwicki, who was in NASCAR. And we did a little deal with them. And I said, how could I get you guys to become a major player, big time? He goes, "Well, deliver us a sponsor that could sell our oil and increase our market share." He said, "Somebody like Kmart." And I said, "Oh, that gives me an idea." So I called Kmart, got a hold of a guy named Norm Roberts, and I said, "I represent this racing team, and Ari Lyondike's the driver, and uh, we've got this idea that I'd like to come up and talk with you about." And so I went up to Troy, Michigan, and I met with him, and he loved the idea. But when I made the decision to not go with Ott to uh, the other team, I had already made this introduction to Kmart, and I didn't tell him about it. And so I called Kmart, uh, and in the interim, a friend of mine, Jack Safro, who was a big car dealer, uh, whenever Pravimi would buy a Lola, Jack would handle the acquisition of the car. And he said to me, he goes, "Ralph, why don't you go talk to Carl Haas? You live in the same town." And I said, "Well, I know Carl, but I don't know him well." And Carl had a huge sponsorship deal with Beatrice, and Beatrice got bought out by KKR, and the company got broken up, and they ended their racing program. I know they gave Carl a nice check when they did that, but he didn't really have a sponsor. So Jack and I went and talked to Carl, and I told him I got this idea with Kmart where they could work with their vendors, and the vendors will put up the money for the sponsorship. And Kmart will give them benefits like advertising, marketing, product placement, midway aisles, things like that. And Carl goes, and with the cigar goes, "Well, Ralph,
Yep.
you could give it a try, but it ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna work." So I said,
Typical
"Well,
Carl.
let me ask you this: do I have your permission to tell Kmart that I'm representing Newman Haas Racing, Mario Andretti, and Paul Newman?" He goes, "Sure, go ahead." So I got on the phone like that same day and called Norm, and I said, "Norm, there's been a change in our racing program." He goes, "Oh no." He said, "That's bad news." He goes, "We were really excited about it." I said, "Well, you're about to get more excited about it because you're going to have Mario Andretti as your driver and Paul Newman and Carl Haas as the team owners." And he said, "When can you be here?" And I said, "Well, I can be there tomorrow." So literally the next day, I was in the chairman's office, and making the deal. And it went from one car to two cars. We had Mario, Michael. We had the first father and son team, and then they went and decided to get into NASCAR, and we ran two cars in NASCAR, and it was a major program that went on for a long time, and it actually it became profitable for Kmart, uh, because we actually raised more money than what our budget was, and Kmart got a little bit of that back. So a wonderful experience in working with Kmart. And Joe Antonini, who was the first chairman of Kmart, was a prince. And when he retired from Kmart, he actually went into the winery business, and he's the co-owner of the Andretti Winery. And so he and Mario
Ah.
started a winery, and I'm a very small shareholder in that. But the Andretti wines, by the way, are outstanding. I highly recommend them.
Oh, perfect. That's actually, and I did not know that Antonini was from Kmart, was an investor with Mario. See, seventh
Yeah,
year over
I
fans, you learn something new all the time on this show.
yeah, I think actually Joe is actually the primary owner. There are other shareholders. I had a couple of my friends that had money to invest and buy stock, but uh, Mario has a relationship with them. Obviously, that it's the Andretti Winery, but I really honestly don't know if he's still an owner or not. But uh, his name is on the bottle, and so is his image.
Interesting. All right.
And the
So
wines are
I
great.
want to, and trust me, my wife is a big wine drinker. She will love it, and so we're gonna. I think we've had it before, but I'm gonna have to go find it here locally again. But before we continue that conversation, I don't want to lose that train of thought there, Ralph. I just want to take a minute here. Just seventh gear over at fans. Obviously, this is one of a number of great conversations that we've had with great folks like Ralph here today. And if you like what you're hearing, by all means, share us with your friends and your family. Hit that like button. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button so we can continue to grow our subscribers. We're really trying to put that effort into our YouTube channel here. People love to see the people that we're talking to and hear the great conversations that we've been having. So, again, hit that like button, share it, all of those great things. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. At the same time, let's make sure that we're supporting our show partners here at krausemeats.com. It is now holiday season, and they are the purveyors of the finest small batch handcrafted artisan sausages and meats in all of North America. Be sure to check out their website, krausemeats.com. They've got new lower pricing, perfect for the holidays, along with gift baskets. I mean, who doesn't like meat for a Christmas gift? Nobody, right? And if you don't, you're wrong. At the same time, let's go ahead and make sure that we take a good look at our folks over at Respect Your Package and Dick Carriers, makers of those great premium breathable men's underwear with ball bustier technology. They are respectfully scandalous yet unapologetic. And if you go to their website and you put in the discount code RESPECT7, which is the number 7, not just the spelling, but respect7, you'll get 20% off of your entire order. So make sure you go to respectyourpackage.com. And if you think about it, you could partner that with an order from Krause Meats and make everybody in your household happy. So make sure you check those guys out, support them. They support the show, and it's great for all of us. And now back with Ralph. Ralph, that's a fantastic transition. And one of the things when I said at the top of the show, I kind of view you as the godfather of modern motorsports sponsorships. Seeing how that Kmart deal played out, we've seen sort of copycats down the line in years past, like what Ganassi did with Target and all of those things. But without getting too far down that road, what were those initial days with getting to know Mario and then getting to know Paul Newman after having brought together that great sponsorship deal that was initially destined for a different team?
Well, it was incredible that it worked so smoothly, and if I wanted to go meet with somebody to pitch them on being a sponsor, and I call the CEO of a major corporation, and I could say, I'd like to have a meeting with you and I'd like to bring Paul Newman and Mario Andretti. Obviously, no one ever said no. So I had a huge
Ace is in the
advantage,
hole.
and it was it was very advantageous. But one of the I'll talk a little bit about how things changed a little bit when Nigel Mansell came over, but
Oh, please.
uh, one of the things that uh, I was with Paul in New York one time when we were having lunch at his apartment that he had on Fifth Avenue, and he had made this salad, and he had great salad dressing. You know, it was just wonderful. And a couple of days later, a friend of mine who actually was a partner for a while in my business was a franchisee of McDonald's. He actually owned 50 McDonald's restaurants and one of them was close to our office. And I went over there one day, and they had salads, and basically what it was, you got like a big plastic cup with lettuce and this gooey stuff on the top. And I took it back to the office because his offices were in the same building as mine. And I put it on the desk, and I said, "Bill, what do you call that?" He goes, "Well, it's supposed to be a salad." I said, "It's disgusting." He goes, "You're right." I said, "Well, you know, I've got an alliance with Paul Newman." I said, "What if we could get Newman's Own to make the salad dressings and maybe create new salads for McDonald's?" And he said, "You think Paul would do it?" I said, "If there was a benefit to the Newman's Own Foundation financially by McDonald's, he would do it." So my friend knew the CEO of McDonald's. At the time, it was a gentleman by the name of Michael Quinlan, who unfortunately just passed away. And we went to Oak Brook, and I talked to him about the idea. And we ended up making a deal where McDonald's put Newman's Own salad dressings in all of their uh, restaurants. Uh, I won't go into all of the details about what the arrangements were, but they were, you know, uh, very, very beneficial for McDonald's. The program went on for about, I think, 12 years, and it raised over $300 million that went into the Newman's Own Foundation, and 100% of it was given away to dozens and dozens of different charities. And
Holy
that
smokes.
that salad dressing deal was life changing. I mean, it was just an amazing thing. McDonald's at the time was floundering. Uh, everybody was saying their food made people fat, and their stock was languishing. It was probably about $11 or $12 a share when we made the announcement at a McDonald's store in Times Square in New York. And a lot of press were there and everything, and the media loved it because all of a sudden they're saying McDonald's has finally got healthy food, and the moms can come back and get a salad, and the kids can have their burgers. And McDonald's business, it's literally skyrocketed, and their stock value kept going up and up and up and up and up. And uh, so we got McDonald's to sponsor Newman Haas Racing, and we got 4 Champ Car championships in a row for him with Sebastian Bourdais. Never
Right.
been done
Yeah, I remember
before.
that great picture of you. And I
Yeah.
figured that had
So,
something to do with it, but yeah.
you know, it raised a ton of money, and it was very, very beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, and you're right. That was one of those epic sponsorship programs that really, you know, stood out, head and shoulders above the rest.
Yeah, we were proud. We've had, you know, some of the other sponsors that we've had too have been just absolutely fantastic. Texaco Haviland, uh, incredible sponsor, and they were like a co-sponsor on our car for many, many, many years. And obviously, we had programs with Eli Lilly, um, and we did deals with Lilly Diabetes and a couple of their other products. And so we've had some major sponsors that have been incredibly supportive and wonderful to work with. You can,
Yeah, no kidding, and that's in no small part thanks to you and your influence. Now, thinking back on that epic era there with Newman Haas, especially in the early days with Paul and with Mario, Had you known either of them before then, and how did that friendship through all those years of that partnership, that commercial partnership with them, kind of evolve, if you will?
Well, I I had obviously known Mario, and uh, we weren't, real close friends, but we got along very well. And the first time I ever saw Paul Newman was, when he was filming the movie Winning at the Speedway. I was a college student. I
Yes.
was down there, got to see him while he was filming the movie. But uh, when I first started working with Newman Haas Racing, uh, that's when I really became very close with Paul. And I can honestly say there was hardly a day that ever went by that he and I didn't talk on the phone at least once. And we were very close. And I got involved in his camps, the hole in the wall camps. Uh, there's a number of wonderful stories about that. But uh, he was the one that really got me interested in doing philanthropic things and raising money for charities and uh, putting together the various cause marketing programs that we do and are still doing.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's true. You are still very involved in that. Now, you alluded to something just before the break about how things changed when Nigel Mansell came across in the early '90s. There, I think it was '92. I want to say.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, uh, Nigel was the Formula One world champion, and Carl thought, boy, it would be a feather in our cap if we could get the world champion to come to IndyCar. And so he and Paul went to work, and it turned out that uh, Nigel actually had the desire to accomplish something in addition to what he had already done. And he agreed to come to drive for Newman Haas. And there was a test. The first test was actually at Phoenix and on that little oval. And he had never driven on an oval. In fact, I don't think he's ever seen one. And so it took a while to get the car set up and everything, but he did extremely well. But the point that I wanted to make was because he was the world champion, there were, I would say, 150 media people from around the world at that test, filming it and talking about it. So at the time, the TV coverage, there might have been IndyCar might have been on coverage on 40 or 50 in 40 or 50 different countries. It went up to like 150
Sure.
because it was the world, and then he was two world champions paired together that were at one time former teammates, Mario and Nigel. It's an unbelievable combination.
Right. And so I know your main involvement was on the commercial side, but was there any hint of any like animosity or one-upsmanship given that there were two former world champions on the same team? Or did they just say, respect each other's talent and let's make this team the best that there is?
No, I think that's a really good way to put it. They had been teammates once before, and I think they both admired the other's abilities. And animosity is not something that I really would say happened at all. Uh, it was a good relationship. Unfortunately, uh, Nigel ended up leaving and going back after the second year, and I'll tell you, it's a great story. Uh, when we were first getting Nigel on board, Carl and I went to an event that we had at Watkins Glen for Corning Glass, and Michael was there and was doing drive arounds with some of the Corning customers, and Nigel's on the phone, and Carl's talking to him about finalizing everything. He says, "Carl, I got to put you on a hold for a minute. I got the Queen on the other line." Carl goes, "The Queen of England?" And he said, "Yes, the Queen." He goes, I'm a OBE, and he said, I got to put you on hold. So Carl goes, I'm on hold. He said, Nigel's talking to the Queen, right? So about 10 minutes later, Nigel's back on the phone, and he says to Carl, he goes, everything's fine. He said, the deal's on. And he said, there was a big demonstration going on at Buckingham Palace. Prince William is one of my biggest fans. And they had people out there with banners and things, save our Nige, save our Nige. And so Prince William asked his grandmother to call Nigel to ask him to stay. And he told her, no, I've
Really?
already made a deal. And when Carl hung up, I'll never forget it. When he hung up the phone, he goes, Ralph, I just out negotiated the Queen of England. That's
uh,
absolute true story. Absolute true story. So it was an interesting time, to say the least. It was if there was a heyday for us. I mean, it was when we had Mario and Mike and Michael, and then we had Nigel, and uh, it was incredible.
that
107
sure
wins.
was. Yeah, you guys were the team back then with that lineup. So that kind of begs the question. I'm going to put it out to seventh gear over fans here as well. Now, Ralph, you spent a lot of time with Mario, still do. You spent time with Nigel, Michael, Christian Fittipaldi, for that matter, Sebastian Bourdais, pretty much all the Andretti's. In your opinion, is Mario the greatest of all time?
In my opinion, in so many ways, he is absolutely. I have so much admiration for him, and he's won in everything. I mean, he was Formula One world champion, an Indy champion, Indy 500 winner. He won the Daytona 500. I mean, he's
Right.
one. He could drive anything and drive it well. So uh, as far as ability, I always, people always say, who do you think the greatest driver of all time is? In my opinion, it definitely was Mario. But uh, Mario has so many other incredible qualities above and beyond his ability as a race car driver. I mean, in my opinion, there's no better ambassador for the world of motorsport in the world than Mario Andretti. And he's so respected and admired. And he's such a well spoken, intelligent man that besides being the greatest driver, he's one of the greatest spokesperson that racing could have ever had. And I just have immense respect for Mario.
Well, and just the fact that you guys are still very close to this day speaks volumes about the person that he is, as well as the person that you are. And there's so many other questions I want to ask you, and I know we've got a limited amount of time here, Ralph. But one of the things that I think about with, especially in your role as the owner of the Pegasus Marketing Group, and all of the commercial and cause marketing things that you've done, there had to have been at least one situation over the years where you were suddenly like the pressure had to have been immense to deliver or to get this deal across the finish line, because if it didn't, it was going to be really bad. People were, you were in the crosshairs or something. Was there ever an incident like that, whether it was, early on with the NASCAR program or the Pravimi deal or Newman Haas, or anything else you've done since then, where you really felt the pressure to deliver, or things were going to get really ugly?
Oh, absolutely. There was on more occasions that I would want to remember, but
I figured as
we had,
much.
like anybody that's in the marketing business, you have disappointments and setbacks. And uh, I actually had had two different sponsorship deals that were significant money, IndyCar deals. After the Mario and Michael thing was over with, and with some of the other drivers that we had quite a few other drivers, but I had two deals that I put together after a lot of effort, and uh, both deals basically the people never fulfilled the contract. They basically just didn't pay, and they got sued. But yeah, when things like that happen, and you're talking about many, many millions of dollars, That makes Carl pretty nervous, because if the
I'll
sponsorship
bet.
doesn't come in, so I would probably, on an average day, I would probably talk to Carl at least 10 times on the phone, and our offices were close, and he'd call me up and he'd go, "Get over here," you know, and I love Carl. I mean, I absolutely loved him, but he was a taskmaster and strict, and he put the pressure on, and he'd tell me, "I'm not sleeping at night. You better get this done." And I and so yeah, I mean, there were more than one situations that caused incredible stress.
Oh, and I can imagine similarly, there had to have been probably at least more than one, like you said, in the stress level days of deals that finally got done, and you're like, whew, I can't believe we got that one done. Did you ever have those where it's like, I didn't think it was going to happen, but holy crap, we actually got it done and made it happen?
Yeah, the first deal that I made with uh, Lily, um, we got the deal. Lily was coming out with a new drug called Cialis, which was you know a competitor to Viagra, and Cialis was going to be the sponsor of the car, uh, Christian Fittipaldi's car, and I got the deal done like literally about 2 weeks before the first race, which the season opener, and I get a call from my dear friend Matt Beebe saying, "Ralph, we've got a problem." He said, "We just got a letter from the FDA saying that they were delaying the final approval on Cialis because they wanted more testing." And he said, "We can't advertise it yet." But he said, "We're not backing out of the deal." He said, Lily has made a deal. We're going to live up to it. And so we went ahead and put Lily on the car. When you saw that picture of Paul Newman and I with Lily on the shirts, um, he couldn't put Cialis on the car except for in Mexico. For some reason,
Wow.
for some reason, the laws were allowed it to be advertised in Mexico, and we had it on the car for the race in Mexico, and we won the race. And I'll tell you how different cultures are and everything. They were people actually walking around in Mexico handing out free samples of Cialis to anybody that want a drug, erectile dysfunction drug, and they're giving out free samples to everybody. So, but yeah, and that was getting that done just a few days before the first race, and then finding out that we had to change the way the cars looked, and it all came together, but it was hectic.
I don't know if I can get past the whole free samples of Cialis thing being handed out in Mexico. That's
Nope,
that's a crazy story.
they had these beautiful girls dressed, in these
Of course they did.
sexy outfits, and they all had Cialis on. You know how the racetrack stuff goes, and beautiful girls walking around and handing out. I think they were little packets of, I don't know, maybe 4 or 6 pills in it. I don't know. I didn't get one.
Just as well, Ralph. You had your mind focused on the business at hand. But and I'm thinking about this, and I know we're getting close to being kind of out of time here. But I think about some of those deals. Lilly, of course, being a big one. McDonald's, Kmart, all those other ones that you had put together over the years. I think about one of the very first deals you did with Newman Haas, and I remember that Mario's car, that beautiful red and yellow Hannah car wash sponsored car.
Yes,
And I think to
right.
myself to this day, I'm like, what car wash company anywhere has the budget to sponsor an IndyCar? How did that deal happen? Because it's just still blows my mind that a
Well,
car wash company
Hannah.
had the wherewithal to sponsor a team.
Oh, and while you're looking at that picture on the windscreen, you see that little Amoco logo.
I do. Yes.
Remember I told you the story about Amoco and how we got
Yes.
Kmart? They played into it, but um, Hannah Car Wash is a company that manufactures car wash systems, and they
Ah.
did hit they did. I'm looking at my screen right now. I just got a text from Mario. Uh, but it was a big company, and Mario knew Mr. Hanna, and Mario actually owned and operated car washes. So, but they would make all the equipment that it takes for a car wash. So it wasn't a small company, and Mario knew the owner, and he was the one that helped put that together. And you'll see on the side there's Rain-X, um,
Hmm.
which was one of the sponsors that I found, and Amico. But um, Mario was the one that had the Hannah relationship.
Gotcha. 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 Okay, that makes sense now. Because since I saw that car debut all those years ago, I always wondered that, and I'd heard the name Dan Hanna, but I just assumed that it was not a car wash equipment manufacturing company. All
Yeah.
right, my friend, as we're getting ready to throw the white flag on this week's episode, you are doing a lot of stuff currently with young drivers coming on. You're representing Al Unser Jr., who's a previous guest on the show. Same thing with the voice of the 500, Paul Page, also a previous guest, and as well helping to negotiate things and working with the Vintage Indie guys and our good friend Mike Lashmet. Tell us a little bit about all the stuff that you got going on now.
Well, I have been focused on trying to help young drivers, and we've had some really good success in getting people started. There's a young female driver, uh, Chloe Chambers, who it's a wonderful story how it all came about. But uh, she's now over in the F1 program for the women. But um, I got a program put together for her through Future Star Racing, and basically they provided her with a ride, and I helped secure a sponsor for her. And um, the thing about the story that really made me excited was, prior to ever knowing anything about Chloe Chambers, I became aware of an organization called the Gift of Adoption Fund. And I called him up one day and I said, I'm in the racing marketing business in the entertainment industry. And I said, I connect, you know, drivers and race teams with charities. And I said, I really like what you do. And I said, would you ever have an interest in having a relationship with a racing driver? And they go, at our board meeting last week, we talked about the fact that we really needed a brand ambassador. And I said, well, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to do, but give me some time and I'll be in touch with you. So a friend of mine called me uh, and told me about Chloe. And she was in karting and she was doing really good. And she wanted to get into cars. And I had this relationship with Future Star Racing and Wings and Wheels Foundation. And so I got on the phone uh, with Chloe and with her mom and dad. And we're talking about, getting ready to give her a test. And the dad says to me, there's something that you should probably know about Chloe and her brother and sister. He goes, all three of them are adopted. And I went,
Wow.
you got you got to be kidding me. I said, I have an organization called the Gift of Adoption Fund that wants a brand ambassador. And I said, it couldn't be anybody better than Chloe. And so to this day, she still has, when she opens up her fire suit, she's got Gift of Adoption on her shirt. And she makes appearances for him. And I believe her dad, I think, might even be on their board of directors. But so I'm helping a number of people. I've got a driver that I'm working with. His name's Garrett Adams. He's driving in the Lamborghini Super Trofeo series. I've got a young driver up in Canada. Uh, and when I say young, he's 15 years old, named Pierce Wade, and he's driving in a series up in Canada called the Janetta series, and he's doing quite well. We've got another young driver from Long Island, Robert Krajewski, I believe is his name, and he started, and we're putting together a cause marketing program actually for each one of those drivers. So also, I spend a lot of time with Vintage Indy. Uh, I'm working on to put together a deal for the title sponsorship and the presenting sponsorship for Vintage Indy. And I'll tell you, this is a bit of a commercial, but I think it's probably one of the best entitlement opportunities that I've ever seen. For the cost, the benefits of being the title sponsor of Vintage Indy are incredible. And if anybody listening is interested, contact me, and I'll send you a nice presentation. But uh, I will be in Indianapolis for the PRI show, and I will be visiting Vintage Indy uh, and introducing a couple of different new companies to them that might become sponsors.
Wow. So absolutely no signs of slowing down there, Ralph. I love it. I may have to just rethink my December schedule here so I can be around during PRI and catch up with you and Mike and the boys over there.
Yeah,
Before we let
I've,
you go, and I know we've taken a fair bit of your day today, but before we let you go, I gotta believe, and I'm curious. I shouldn't say I gotta believe. I know because I have them too. Over all the years you've been doing this, there has to be, and there's probably in your case a more than a handful, just one story about how a sponsor came together or an interaction with a sponsor or at an event or something that's just like out of your mind. Like this is the craziest thing that's happened. Just pick one of the wildest things that you've seen happen in your career, if you could, and share it with the Seventh Gear Overhead fans.
that's a fairly difficult question to answer because,
Because
you
there's
know,
so many, right?
I've hit on a few of them. Uh, but I would have to say, to finalize my story, uh, when I had this idea about getting together with David Hasselhoff with Ari and Pravimi, I had gotten a hold of David Hasselhoff's a manager, a lady by the name of Jan McCormick, and I told her we're going to be racing at Laguna Seca, and I said I've got an idea about something that I'd love to talk to David Hasselhoff about regarding a racing idea. And she goes, well, as you know, he likes cars. She goes, I'll tell him about it. Well, the week before the race, on a Howard Batman, who I mentioned, who was Tony Hallman's lawyer, died, and I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and it was in Terre Haute, and the funeral was on a Friday morning. So I went to the funeral on a Friday, drove over to Indy, got on an airplane, flew out to California, uh, and Pravimi had hired one of these floors in that tower that they have at Laguna Seca for hospitality, and I wanted to make sure everything was set up right. And I went out there, and I'm looking out at the, you know, track and thinking about my friend who had died, and I'm feeling bad that I never got hold of David or anything. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice. Oh, wow, this would be an unbelievable place to watch the race. And I turn around, you're not going to believe me, but there was David Hasselhoff and another man. And I said, David, it's Ralph. You got my message. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, I sent you a message. I wanted to meet with you out here. I've got an idea about you teaming up with our racing team. He goes, well, I never got that message. He said, who'd you talk to? I said, Jan McCormick. And the guy that's with him says, Jan's my sister. And she never mentioned anything to me. And David said, you know, I'd love to talk with you about it. He said, I've got this idea where I want to bring chronically and terminally ill children to the races. He said, I get so many requests from Make-A-Wish that I want to be able to do it in big groups. So I said, come with me. So we went over to the bus, the Pravimi bus, and Ari was there. And I come strolling in with David Hasselhoff and Buddy McCormick. And I mean, within the hour, we had made a deal. We, you know, Pravimi Racing became Hasselhoff Grunewald Race for Life Racing. And the whole time I'm sitting there saying, This was divine intervention. This could not have happened as a coincidence. My friend who died, God bless him, made it happen. And I truly believe that.
Wow. What a crazy great story, Ralph. And it just goes to show that yeah, divine things can happen. And I think you are absolutely right about how that came together. So, all right, as we wrap up this week's show, Ralph, I know you said anybody that it may be interested in entertaining a title sponsor or presenting sponsor for Vintage Indy, or perhaps not that you have all kinds of free time on your schedule, but if any perhaps any younger drivers are looking for a little bit of help, but in terms of Vintage Indy and stuff, how do people find you to get in touch with you to talk about that opportunity further?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Just you can contact me through our website, and it's quite an interesting website actually. It's nothing real fancy. My son created it for me a number of years ago, but it's got all the different drivers that we've worked for, all the sponsors that we've had, all of our cause marketing programs, and you can connect to Pegasus Marketing Group. It's just easy to remember. It's just www.pegasusmarketing.com, and my all my contact information is on there. And uh, also, if somebody sees anything that I have on uh, Facebook or Instagram, they're more than welcome to comment or send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a very low tech guy. I call myself a dinosaur, but I know enough, I guess, to get in trouble.
You are an effective dinosaur, if that's what you want to call yourself, my friend. You are the man. So, all right, Ralph, I can't tell you how honored it's been to have you. I could talk with you for hours and hours and hours just to listen to more of the stories and everything that you've experienced. But thank you so much for coming on Seventh Gear Over Ev this week. I hope that we can get you back on the show one of these days, and perhaps, hopefully, if I can work my schedule, we can maybe we can do some things in person together. But thank you very much for coming on this week. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm delighted and honored to do it, and there are a lot of other really cool stories that we can talk about. If you look behind
I
me, you
know
see
there
that
are.
Paul. You see Paul Newman on the wall behind me, looking over my shoulder. He's there every day telling me, "Do the right thing."
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, indeed. And I know you're absolutely right. We could get into a lot more stories, and we barely scratched the surface on Paul. But I know I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you got other things to do. But let's reconvene perhaps after the holidays. So again, Ralph, it's been a true honor and a pleasure to have you on this week. We really appreciate it. When you respond to Mario, give him our best. Tell him we look forward to him coming on the show as soon as he has the as soon as he has the opportunity to do it.
He's going to be the speaker for the Ralph Shaheen, and I guess is going to interview him at the opening breakfast at PRI on the morning of December 11th. So that'll be
There you go.
interesting.
That should be a great breakfast, kind of keynote sort of speaker there. So again, all of our best to him and the family, and our best to you. If I don't get a chance to talk with you before the holidays, happy Thanksgiving. I will try to catch up with you post haste. But again, happy Thanksgiving, and thanks again for coming on the show.
Well, and I got to start buying some of your meat.
Yes, sir. And the great thing is we ship all throughout the contiguous U.S., North America. So you will not be disappointed with anything from Kraus Meats. We've got
Well,
some new offerings coming up, and by the way, I make a trip up your way pretty regularly since my kids are up just outside of Milwaukee. So all right, Seventh Gear Over F fans. This has been an epic show with our good friend and friend of the show, Ralph Howard Hansen. You heard so many great stories, and there's so many more that we didn't even get into yet today, without taking too much advantage of his graciousness with his time today. So, with that said, Seventh Gear Over F fans, again, make sure you're smashing that subscribe button. We're trying to grow that subscriber base, so please go ahead and smash it like like we'd like you to do. But also understand that next week's show is going to be probably our last show for 2025, and it will also be our 100th, yes, 100th episode on the audio side. And at that point, I expect that we will be over 10,000 downloads all time. So thanks to all of you listeners. We are also now heard in 114 countries worldwide, and hopefully we continue to grow that with great guests like Ralph. And I guess that's about it for this week's show, gang. So make sure that you stay tuned for the latest and the greatest spectacle in podcasting. See ya.